Okay, so we're towards the end of Siman Kuf Peichet in the Hilchos Niddah. Just do a quick review of where we left off last time and try to finish the Siman. There are various situations where a woman can really be in doubt as to what's happening to her. It almost happens all the time that women go to see the doctors or should consult with their doctors as to what is happening to their body. They're seeing something come out of it that they're not used to. They're used to seeing blood. It may have a different coloration, and we spoke already a little bit about marois, about the various colors. All shades of red is more of a concern, and with black, others are questionable. One needs to ask a shaila, of course. But what if she sees chunks of pieces of something coming out of her body? What is that supposed to be? What should she do about it? Could it be that that is also a blood, a type of blood? Does that render her tmeya? And in the same way that is a question that arises from time to time, which we'll cover now, there is also another possibility where a woman is not a niddah at all, completely clean, but something was stuck in her body. A shvoferes, some sort of tube. Either she did it, a doctor did it, an exam, regardless of what the reason was. It's important to know the size of the tube. It's important to see if any blood came out, of course. We want to know how far the tube went in, if it went to the makor or not. She's seeing blood as a result of being bruised by the tube, minatzdadim, from the sides, or is it actually blood coming out from the makor? So these are all kinds of issues that can come up, and do come up, with women, either when they're pregnant to go to an exam, or perhaps if a woman for some reason had to check herself and use this shvoferet, use this kind of tube to examine herself, and there was blood. So these are the issues that we began to discuss. With shvoferes, we said for the most part, dam that comes out from the shvoferes is tehora. This is not the way a woman sees. So this is not the time of her veset, even though you may say that even if it was the time of her veset, some leniencies as well, because we know she's causing it, but we don't say that during the time of one's veset, the halachas are a little bit strict. We have to assume, account for that. This could be her veset. But if it's not during her veset and she just sticks in a tube, she collects some blood in the tube, this is not the derech for a woman to see. And that's basically the basis of the heter, of why blood coming out in such a fashion does not render her tmei. She's tehora. So we briefly covered that. I mean, that's part of the sugi of the Gemara on what exactly or how exactly does the blood have to come out to make her tmei. So the normal way we know is for a woman to have a sensation. Sometimes women don't feel the sensation. There's still tmeias as soon as they check themselves during that time of the month, and they see the regular blood flow. Yet even though in the beginning it may not be so heavy, they can usually tell when it's coming. However, what makes it more unusual is chaticha. We began to discuss chaticha. Chaticha is already something which could be a little bit frightening too. I mean, these chatichas, these pieces of flesh or tissue, and she doesn't know what it is. And we did say that if she sees dam in the chaticha, in the folds of the chaticha, in the bekoim, it's tehora. Because this is also, the Mechaber says, he goes along with the svara, that this is not derech lirois king. This is not the normal way to see. Now, what are we talking about here, this chaticha? Because we're going to be seeing a lot of it in the next few seeds. There's quite a bit of a difference between what's going on in Sif Gimel and what's going on later on. In Sif Gimel, we're talking about the uterus. Uterus falling apart. It could come out as one piece. As we said, that's called a uterine prolapse. Yeah. Which is something that doctors know about, gynecologists know about. And it doesn't happen to most women, but it happens. And that, of course, presents all kinds of problems if, in fact, blood follows it as well. Here we're not talking yet about the blood. We're talking about the piece of uterine, either the whole thing coming out or pieces of it coming out. And a lot of the Meforshim pretty much learn is that what the Torah had in mind was for blood to flow naturally, not to come about as a result of the uterus coming with it. Dam is supposed to flow from the uterus, but here the uterus came out too. Does that make her tmeya? So that is a little bit of what's going on in Sif Gimel, part of the discussion. But without the blood, so far what do we see? We see chatichas. we see a chaticha, and now the question is, does this chaticha have blood on it? Because if there's no blood on it, well, it's not blood. It's part of the uterus. So that would not be a shaila at all, just because the uterus came out. So what?
Is that with respect to our halacha?
Well, obviously, it is an issue, sure, medical issue. But here, we're talking about it also, dam b'chaticha. Afilu hi mevukaat, and even though it has folds, it has cracks, v'adam bebekoim, and the blood is in the bekoim. So in other words, it's coming out with its blood. Be'inyan shenogea b'bsor, it's touching her flesh. Tehora, she's clean. Why? Kivan shein derech liros kedem mechaber says that's not the way to see. That's not dam niddah. Bekitzer, that's not dam niddah. And some would want to argue that even if it would be dam niddah, in a sense, the fact that it's happening this way, in the way it's happening, it wouldn't make her tmeya. Because the regular way is for the dam to come from the uterus, not for the uterus to come out with it. All right. But the mechaber just says poshet, that kivan shein derech liros ken. If it came out and the dam is in the bekoim, even if you see some blood in it, fine. This is not to say that the mechaber would say that she's tehora if there was other blood aside. The mechaber from the Beis Yosef is mashma that he would hold that this is only the blood coming out with these pieces, but any other blood coming from the side, that would render her tmeya. Whereas the Ramah said no, as long as she's seeing pieces, and those pieces are in the vaginal area, it's from the makkah. It's similar to dam hamaka. So v'chein, in the second part of the mechaber was v'chein isha sheneka mekor shela, the whole thing ukemin chatichos basar noflim mebeis achitza tehara. So all kinds of pieces are falling out, either one pieces, however you want to look at it, coming out. Tehara, she's clean. So the Ramah on that said afilu also dam. Why? Even she's seeing other blood. So that's the difference between the mechaber and the Ramah. The Ramah says the other dam is also okay. It would not make it tmeya because as long as you have chatichas in the beis achitza shel tehora, why the talin and dam bechatichazu? We say that this dam came as a result of the chaticha. Since hoil v'yadino vaday shenei kamekor, we know for sure her uterus has moved. It's not in place. So she has like blood, like of a makkah, like an injury. Okay. From the Beis Yosef, it's mashma that no. So Beis Yosef would argue, if other dam, other than the dam in the chatichas, that would make her tmeya. And the Ramah says, as long as you still have chatichas there, obviously you still have to have chatichas, then we can attribute the dam to those chatichas. However, the mechaber is not done yet. It says, what I told you about chatichas being not a problem, she would be tehora, don't be so sure that those chatichas are not dam. We have to really give this a further examination. And the mechaber holds, who shehita lachatichos b'mayim poishrim. Mechaber says you first have to take these pieces and put it in lukewarm water. Now when it says poishrim, lukewarm is really not the correct translation here, perhaps. Because lukewarm tends to say warm. I would say it's more like room temperature, as we will see in the next seif. As long as it's not cold water, that's the main. It could be hot water too. As long as it's not cold, that's the idea. So he adds a condition, two conditions actually. One is shehita lachatichos b'mayim poishim v'lo nimochu. You put the pieces into water that's not cold, warm water, and it did not liquefy. So, because if it would liquefy, you would see that it's blood. So it remains a piece, and it's not blood. Second condition is that these pieces are small pieces. Dafka chatichas ktanos dumya de shoferes, the size, diameter of a tube. Very small pieces. Chatichok doila, because once you have a big piece, I don't care what it looks like, he says, tmeya. It's going to make her tmeya for another reason. Even though there's no blood. Why? Well, because of a klal of which most Rishonim hold. Because it's not possible, it's a machlokes in the Gemara, Chacham and Rabbi Yehuda, and many hold like Rabbi Yehuda, that it's not possible for the kever, for the uterus that's called a kever, a tomb, it's not possible for it to open up without some blood coming out, without some blood not coming out. So if it opened up a little bit, more than a shoferes, but an inch or so, more than 3/4 of an inch, it could be a problem. there could be dam. You may not see it, so what? But we're making that assumption, because that's what Rabbi Yehuda holds. It's not possible, he says, for the kever to open up and for there not to be blood. So since there may be blood, I would make it tmeya. So if you have a big piece means that it opened up. So the Mechaber says, so you have here two conditions for chaticha not to be an issue. Number one, you first have to check it in water. You have to see that it doesn't liquefy. Number two, you want to make sure it's not a big piece, because otherwise it may not be blood, but it opened up the kever. You opened up the kever, that means there is blood somewhere. Now what's interesting here, I don't know why the Meforshim don't talk about it here. I mean, they do talk about it, but it's not so apparent here. I think maybe only in the Shach. This could make a big difference. A ticha coming out of a woman can make a big difference of if she's pregnant or not, if it's before 40 days or after 40 days. If it's after 40 days, and we'll be learning this halacha later on, she's going to run into the problem of tumas leida, the impurity of leida, of birth. And since we don't know if this is a boy or a girl, we're going to be machmir and treat it as she's having a girl, which is 14 days instead of 7. So beyond the 40-day, if she in fact, this is a miscarriage of sorts, this is beyond the 40-day mark, she can have other issues. It was a more serious issue of tumas leida, that she has to now begin, as though she just gave birth. So we're assuming that this is not a leida, we're talking about this within 40 days, we're talking about that she's not pregnant at all. What could this be then? We're going to see that next. What is exactly is she? What are these? What does all this mean? But for the time being, we know that it is possible for a woman to have chatichas coming out, whether it's piece of the uterus or it's something else, and what's required is for her to check it out, according to the Mechaber. According to others, obviously, if this is part of her uterus, there's no reason to check it out. That doesn't seem to be a requirement for everyone. As far as being a big piece coming out, there will be a consensus on that if you hold the efshar ptichas hakever beloy dam. The only machloekes perhaps would be the machloekes amongst the achronim. Does ptichas hakever only happen from the inside, or can it also happen from the outside? The Niddah Yehuda, I believe, is the one that says, and a lot of achronim are machmir, like that no matter how it happened, if the ptichas hakever, even with an instrument being stuck inside and opening up the uterus, that would make a ptichas hakever. Whereas the Chazon Ish says ptichas hakever perhaps is only when it comes naturally by itself, where the body is expanding, or I should say the body is causing the uterus to expand, to widen, and to bring about this blood. So that's another interesting machlokes, and I think the Rav Wosner is machmer on this too, that if you stick an instrument that's wide enough, more than a shvoferes, it can cause a ptichas hakever, it could render her unclean. So we always need to look into that. We need to see what kind of an instrument was used. Can we trust this doctor? What was the exam? And by knowing the type of exam, usually you can determine what kind of an instrument was used, how long it is, how wide it is. And of course, you should always check yourself to see if there was any dam after such an exam. Because then we may be able to figure out if this is a bruiser. All of that can make a difference, whether she has to go to the mikveh again. Alright, so now we're going to go into Sif Daled, Hey and Vav, and see a little bit more about what are all these pieces coming from. What we've seen so far is the uterus coming out, which was an example, a case that can happen, which presents its own set of problems. We have the problem of the size, like the Mechaber says, plus we have the problem of seeing additional blood, according to Mechaber. Still, you would need to check it, according to the Mechaber. In the next seif, the Mechaber makes a statement. If you know for sure something is blood, I don't care what it looks like right now. Kol dam hayotze min ha'isha ben lach ben yavesh tmeo. Any dam that comes out, whether it's in liquid form or if it's dry, it could have dried up, it could have coagulated, congealed. What's the better correct word? Clotted blood. Makes no difference. Even if it's dry, it's tmeo. So in the Torah, and this is again from the Gemara, the pasuk says ki yazuv, if the blood flows. Did the Torah really mean literally only blood that flows is tomeh? Or the Torah was just talking or describing using a more general language? Blood usually flows. So when the blood usually comes out, it's tmeya, makes the woman tmeya. But it doesn't mean that if the blood consistency changed, it's now all of a sudden not blood that's tameh. And that's how we hold. Mechaber basically says, Bein lach ben yovish, blood is blood. If this is blood, then it's tameh. The question is everything what we see, blood. What else could it be? Mechaber says, Velo oidel afilo yotza mimeno tzurat bria, kemin klipot, kemin sarot, kemin yafchushim adumim tmeo. You could have a situation where that what's coming out of her is not anything that looks like blood. It looks like a creature, a birya, something. It looks kemin klipot, all kinds of shells, scales, or hair, or you know what a gnat is? G-N-A-T? Little mosquitoes. That's what yafchushim adumim, red gnats. I think that's the best translation. Little bugs. She could be a tmeya. Now, obviously, the Mechaber is going to tell us not so quick. We have to check this one too. But what is this? I'm curious. I don't know. I'm learning this, let's say, for the first time. And I said, wow. What is this? What is the woman seeing? I mean, an average woman would be concerned. She's not expecting this. So what could this be? So I looked it up. I did some homework. What are the possible medical, or I shouldn't say medical, either natural or pathological, it was either related to illness or not, possibilities of a woman seeing something like that. So it could be pathological, it could be, in other words, illness related, or it could be not. It turns out that you may have heard something called fibrosis. And fibrosis is basically scarring, if we can call it. Scab. On the skin, we have a scab, a layer. Inside of a woman's body, there can be, as a result of some illness, something that's happening there, that the lining of the uterus is becoming scarred. And there's different kinds, of course. We're not going to get into that right now, to how fibrosis forms, but it's a medical issue. And there could be all kinds of other tissues from the uterus lining itself that can come out, besides the endometrium. The endometrium, is that membrane, like we can call, that forms once a month in the woman, which is basically what the blood is. When that membrane when there's no fetus being formed, right? When there's no pregnancy, it falls apart, and that's the blood flow that she sees. So sometimes there could be something called more fibrin. Fibrin is like fiber. Actually, what the fibrin really is, it's what helps the blood to clot. So sometimes some of that blood may have more of its share of fibrin, which means you see all of a sudden pieces of blood clots. But it's not only blood clot. That's the thing here. If it's a blood clot, then it's blood. So it's not just blood. I was just giving you a few examples of what else could it be other than blood that's coming out as a solid. That's a possibility too. But there's all kinds of things that can come out from the mucus that's building up there, the lining, the scarring of the uterus. As a result of the scarring, all kinds of pieces will peel off and come out. And that is what she's seeing. Is there more? Yeah, I think there's more. I didn't recall checking all of the possibilities. And this happens all the time. I read, but based on what I read, this happens all the time. Pieces of all kinds, of sizes of all kinds, colors of all kinds. And that's what the Mechaber is talking about here. Well, the first thing she should do is go to her doctor. The first thing, yeah. What is this? It could be a tumor, chas v'shalom.
So if the doctor looks at it, what would be the determination of the doctor that will say?
Well, that's what the Mechaber says. The Mechaber says right now that what she can do, after she made her appointment with the doctor, before she goes to the doctor, what she can do, or what she should do, is Tmeya, she could be unclean if she sees these things, if they liquefy. She would have to soak it in water for 24 hours and see if they liquefy and make sure that those waters all along are room temperature. Let's use the word room temperature. They're not cold. Kol meshech me'es leis shehem b'torah, that they're inside. What?
During those 24 hours, efficient or not?
Yeah, she's tmeya. Yeah, exactly. She has to right now watch out. There's a good chance she may be tmeya. Good point. Yeah. V'hu sheyu nemuchim betoch me'es leis.
The doctor for examination.
Well, she has to check her body out. She has to see what this is.
Well, if she's checking it, then it's not going to go.
Well, she's going to see several pieces.
Well, let's say she sees.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
So she could, what is the rabbi going to say? Go and soak it.
No, you need to soak it. That's for sure, because you see something that is not the usual.
Making it after
Right.
it's soaked.
Right. If it's dry blood, I mean, the greater the expert, the more one knows, you can tell, may be able to tell right away. But here, there's several ways that one can make a quick determination. Well, one is not so quick, 24 hours. The other one we'll see inside in a minute, can be faster. So far he says she's tmeya, but that's on condition that she follows the exam. But if after me'es le'es it's not nimuch, if they're still dry, hard, she's clean. So let me read it inside. The mayim has to be lukewarm, or I should say room temperature, the entire 24 hours that it's inside. The Mechaber gives, there's various ways to determine how warm. One way is what the Mechaber says is like water that was drawn in the summer from the river or from a well. And they were sitting in the house. In the house, the heat of the house warms them up. It was basically room temperature, approximately. And this type of temperature is what we would also need when we ask for a shir of poishrim during the winter months. Then we see another explanation. Ustam poishrim einan chamin yoisem mechamimos arok. Regular poishrim is never warmer than the warmth of saliva. Yeah. Alright, so going back to what we said before. Therefore, if they're hard, and they remain hard even after being soaked, they're not being liquefied. Even though now, after you've tried for 24 hours, and you go ahead and put it in your hand, and somehow with the friction of your hand, they do fall apart. Still, once you've tried soaking, and soaking didn't accomplish it, even though the friction with the fingers, which is stronger than the water, accomplishes it, she's still clean. However, if you first tried the friction of your fingers, and they did not become liquefied, then she's tahora, and we don't even have to check with tree. Because, as we said, the mi'uch with the fingers is much stronger. So if you don't have to do it. If you really wanted to try it out and if nothing happens with your finger, then it should be tahora, you don't have to do the Ramah says. Now, so far you say, okay, that shouldn't be too difficult to check out. But it's not always that simple, that easy. Sometimes it's pretty obvious that she's seeing blood, plus she's seeing that. So the Mechaber in Sif Hey says, that if they didn't liquefy, that she's clean. They're completely dry and there's no other blood, there's no blood. But if you see blood coming out of them, then of course it's blood. Now why is this different than from before? Because this is the derech, and that's not the derech. The uterus coming out, pieces coming out from the uterus, that's not the derech for a woman. So you can say, even if it comes with blood, but that's not the derech. Here we're talking about a woman who sees her regular blood. She's not pieces of uterus coming out. So some of it is solid and some of it is not. Oh, you have some of it that's not? Then the whole thing is blood. You don't even have to check it. Then we assume that the rest is also blood. But it clotted, maybe because it was once upon a time liquid, and it became clot. These things can happen. So that's the dogish, that's the main point in Ifehei. That if there was additional blood, this halacha would therefore be different than the halacha from before, because this is the derech a woman sees.
Just solely on it being liquid and the right color.
No, well, we have, if it's a solid, we want to make sure is this blood or not. I mean, if it's...
You said though if it's not solid...
The problem here, you know what the problem here is? The problem here is that it has a weird, strange surah. Otherwise, the Mechaber started off saying, Kol dama yotzim min isha, blood that comes out, whether it's liquid form or dry form, it's blood.
So we are the right color.
Yes.
The right color and consistency.
Now, as far as consistency, what we said, there is a machlokes in the achronim. What happens if after soaking it in water for 24 hours or after rubbing it, it does not liquefy, but it becomes like a jelly, like a wax. They describe it as a wax. It's a machlokes. Some are machmir, some say it's okay. I think the Badei Shulchan, I think, is lenient on that. He brings that example too, because the fact that shelo hirgish, since there was never a hargosha to begin with, a sensation, I think, plus this, that it's not exactly liquid, that it's okay. So after trying with your fingers, or after soaking it, it becomes like a donag. That's the lashon they use, like wax, like a gel. So it's not exactly liquefied, but it's not a solid either. That's a machlokes achronim. Badei Shulchan, I don't know if it was Badei Shulchan or was another, somebody else. Somebody brings it down in his matir. Now here we said she's tehora on condition that there's no other dam. Because as we said, the dam here is on the chatichas. As the Shach explains that this din is not the same as before, even though we had dam in the bekim, in the folds, in Sif Gimel, that was totally unusual, totally not normal to see blood that way. But here, this is the way she usually sees it, so that's what she would be tmeya. As the Taz also explains it, the Taz says here you can't say in darko shel isha bechach. Since you have blood, you do say darko shel isha bechach. So that would make a big difference. In other words, even if they did not liquefy, you do see other blood, then we assume that the rest somehow is still blood. It's in a solid form, and it's not liquefying for some reason. Comes along the Ramah on Sif Hein says like this. Let's say you soaked it in water, some of them became liquefied and some of them did not. The tmeya, she's unclean. He says, but I'm of the opinion, the Ramah says, that if she checked herself 3 times, all the time she checked herself, they never liquefied this kind of blood, cloud. If she ever encounters something like that again in the future, she doesn't have to check it anymore. She has a chazaka. She has some sort of chazaka that what she is seeing is really not blood, but it's coming from some sort of makkah that she has in her body. Right? Comes along, the Ramah adds one more point here. So all of what I just told you is only applies to a woman who has a veset, and this is shelo b'shas vesto.
So it's at the end, or is the Ramah everything?
Oh, excellent. Yeah. When you first read the Ramah, you're saying, what is he talking about? There's a lot of information going on here. Now the Shach says, wait a minute, I disagree. If the Ramah really means what he means, that this applies to everything he said, says that can't be. The Ramah wants to say that there's a chiluk, whether it's b'shas vesto or not. She has a veset and she doesn't have a veset. There's a little bit of a problem here. Now, what's the problem? Why was there a chiluk before? In Kuf Pei Zayin, when we were introduced to the concept of damach masmaka, that sometimes we have a leniency that you can say, you know what, a woman sees blood, this could be coming from a makkah. We're not going to jump the gun, as you say. I think we're not going to rule so quickly and assume that this is, she's having an irregular veset. It could be a makkah. and sometimes you're toile on the makkah. Over there, when we say toile on the makkah, you don't say toile on the makkah if it's b'shas vesta. Otherwise, she will never become unclean. Remember that? B'shas vesta. Oh, you know what? What she's seeing maybe is a makkah too. What do you mean? Otherwise, she has a veset. You're expecting it now. You're not going to be toile on the makkah so quickly. Because this is her veset. She has a veset. She has a veset. She's supposed to have a veset. So you don't say toile on the makkah there. But the Shach says over here, it's obvious that this may not be dam. This has a weird shape to it. Because it has a weird shape, why should it make a difference if it's veset or not? So the Shach says, I wouldn't go along with the Ramah. What the Ramah is trying to make a chiluk, that what if that chiluk applies to everything, including that, that this is only during the time that this is not when she has a veset, because when she has a veset, you don't say this halacha. In other words, that she would be tehara. If it's not nimuach, in other words, if it does not liquefy, it says, where do we see such a chiluk? Go ahead and try to liquefy it. If it doesn't liquefy it, she's fine. No. But this is not during the time of the veset. The Shach says, why should it make a difference? Comes along somebody else, one of the achronim, I forgot with his name, and he says, no, the Ramah is not talking about that. The Ramah would agree. The Ramah would agree that you can examine it. If it stays solid, then she's fine. If it liquefies it, then she's tmeya, regardless of when it is. He says that the Ramah was only talking about the last point he made, and that is that Niddah li im botko gimel pa'amim. What he adds, that if she checked herself 3 times and she did not see it liquefying in water after 3 times, every time she sees solid pieces, she could assume this is not blood. It's never liquefied before. So comes along one of the Achronim and says, on that the Ramah said, as long as it's not her Shasa Vesed. If it is her Shasa Vesed, then she better check herself again.
The 3 times were not Shasa Vesed. But now, when she's relying on those times, it can't be.
It can't be, right. Why? Because if it's Shasa Vesed, she has to always check herself. Right. Because of that. So that I like that. I think that could be very possibly what the Ramah is saying. Otherwise, where does he take it that there should be such a chiluk when she sees solid pieces? It's hard to say. I mean, the Shach obviously saw and understood things better than us. So it's a little hard to say. It could be the Ramah was trying to be mechalik. The doing Shata Vesed, you would have to be a little bit more careful. Well, it's not necessarily so. But anyway, Poshup Shah from the Mechaber, he just says across the board, it says, either it liquefies or it does not. And that's what's going to make the determination. Something that looks strange, something that is not for sure blood, because of the way it looks, you want to check it out. If it's dam, then even if it's yovesh. All right, now we've come to the last seif. It's somewhat of a continuation. Bamed dvorim amurim shetzorich bdika b'shriya. When did we say that she needs to soak it? B'mapeles kemin klipos useares. That's only if she somehow her body was releasing, I guess you can say the word, or what was coming out of her body was all kinds of shells, scales, all kinds of shapes. Ava chatichas dam is solid piece of blood. Even if it's very hard and it does not liquefy, but we know it's blood. Tmeya. Now this is a big machlokes rishonim. The Ravid and the Rashba are the ones that hold like the first opinion in the Mechaber. She's tmeya. Why is she tmeya here? And chatichas dam, because when did we say that you could be shoyre them in water? When tzurosa merchiach aleihem, when you see an unusual shape on them, like klipas and the like, that the tzura is merchiach, that this is not dam. Because dam, even if it dries up, does not become weird shapes. That's how the Meforshim explain it here.
So
dam. What? Exactly. Dam, even if it solidifies, it doesn't solidify in weird shapes. So therefore, with them we said, go ahead and try it. See if it liquefies. But if it's dam, chatichas dam, solid like a rock, and does not liquefy, still according to the Rashba and the Raiva Tmeya. With klipas, if they don't liquefy, then what is they going to show? What is it going to prove? It's going to prove that it's not dam. It's some sort of tissue coming from the woman's body. So the Shriya will make that determination. But something that we know to be dam has nothing to do with it. But that's the Rashba and the Raiva.
Now also dissolved?
Yeah. Maybe, dissolved, yeah. There's a question about if dissolved means dissolved into many, many small pieces, but it's still solid, or dissolved actually in a liquid form. Yeah. No, there's a question in the Poiskim. What would be the case if it turned out from one piece became various splinters? Yeah, I think I saw somebody say that's Meir nonetheless.
Just splintered.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but here we're talking about liquefaction. So if it has all kinds of weird surahs and it does not liquefy, so igloy milsa, we understand. Now we see clearly that it's probably not blood, but what is it? Some sort of birya, some sort of tissue from the inner lining of the uterus or something like that. Masha'inkin if they did become a liquid. Aval dam mamesh, even if it's dry, no.
So basically, it doesn't necessarily look like blood.
Yes.
If it does dissolve, or it doesn't dissolve like blood.
Exactly, because we're misupak. At least sometimes we're misupak. Because if it really looks like blood, then doesn't help us.
It remains solid.
Right, according to the first opinion. So Mechaber brings the two opinions, the machlokes. The first opinion is the Rashba and the Raiva, who holds that thick, hard blob of blood, whatever you want to call it, will always be tmeo, even if it's not nimoyach. V'yesh oimrim, he brings down here, b'shem marazah, and the Rosh also holds like that. Shegam lazet tzorich b'dika b'shirya, that even this, even if it's hard, if it's blood, you would also check it out by soaking it. Why? Because they hold anything that is hard, that does not liquefy after a little bit of time, it's not blood. Just like we learned by klipas and sa'aris. So that's the big machlokes. So, everybody seems to go, I think, mostly like the first opinion, the Rashba and the Raiva, which is machmer. But they have the opinion, that's what, they held, or that's the way they understood from the Gemara, that something that does not liquefy is just not blood. That's the test. That will determine. So it has nothing to do with the shape. Either it is or it's not. And what will determine? If it's in liquid form. In other words, if it is possible for the blood to become a solid, but eventually you could bring it back to its original state. If it does not liquefy, that means it's not blood. They say, go ahead and try it. That's how you will know if this is blood or not.
Could it be because they want to be machmas? If you declare her impure, then
I think
greater than a can.
Yeah.
Maybe they're being machmer, and they still separate the couple. You really have to have very, very forbid her on them.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the motivation.
Well, obviously, we don't want to be machmer unnecessarily. That was always definitely a concern. Koach de heter odef, as the clown goes. If you can find a heter. Here, it's more of a question of metzias in a sense. Can't we figure it out somehow? This is blood or not? So apparently,
People to have all sorts of
but apparently it's not just that. It's not based just on that. It's based on if this is what the Torah also had in mind. In other words, if something does not liquefy, if it's something in this kind of a state, then it's not even considered blood.
It's irrelevant.
I think so. I think that otherwise, that should not be too difficult to figure out. Even though there are certain things that they could not do or did not do in the past, they do today in DNA. So it's not a riot, the fact that we had that in Taaruvot too, I think. There are certain things that can be determined through micro analysis of either tam or not. But what did the Chacham say? We're not going to use that kind of a test. We're going to go by flavor.
But because tam is a different test to actually.
Yeah.
But here we're not talking about an effect.
But they're defining blood.
I think it's the definition. That's why I'm saying it's a definition.
Yeah, they're not using it for a logical definition. They must liquefy.
Yeah, it must be in that kind of a form. Otherwise, it's not really blood. Remember with kavod? Kavod is blood and it's not blood. In the sense, the liver.
But I thought our is blood and not...
For purposes of making her to
defining what blood.
You're right. I'm going to look into it a little bit more to see if I find anyone that speaks about it. Maybe if you have the chance, also look in. But that's the way I understood it. It's more of a definition here. Does this constitute blood or not?
Between halacha defining blood.
Yes. At least in this case, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Now this last din, however, even though the Mechaber brings both, he says, however, in other words, you can go ahead, according to this second opinion, and go ahead and soak it in water and check it out if it's blood nonetheless, as long as it's a small piece. Because remember, we still have the original other problem of ptichas hakever. If it's a big piece, I don't care what it is. If it was large enough for the uterus to open up, that would possibly render her tmeya anyway. So, in the event it was a big piece, there wouldn't be a question here, because you wouldn't even get a chance to soak it. If there's small pieces coming out, even though they're very, very hard, there may be some leniency to soak it in water and check to see what it is exactly. It's nothing that has to do with blood. Based on my reading, there are quite a bit of things other than blood that come out of the body. There are blood clots. There are pieces of blood that clot, and you can usually tell it's blood because of the coloration, pretty much the shape. But something that it has a very unusual type of shape and color and consistency, there's a good chance, based on what I read, that this is something else coming out of that uterus. And if that's the fact, I can understand this the various opinions here. What if it does not liquefy? I mean, well, it depends if you hold it's blood or not. Because what the Mechaber said in the very beginning, kol dam, any blood that comes out from Isha, bein lach ben yovesh is tmeya, if it's real blood. Okay? But here, right, towards the end here, in the Sivav, he explains himself that that's when you see klipas v'saras, but a real solid piece of blood that is not klipas v'saras, that you don't really have that much of a suffix anymore, then shriya wouldn't really help you. In other words, in Siv Daled, he made a simple statement without elaborating further. Bein lach ben yovesh. And he says, and you know what? It could be that she will see other tzuras too. But these other tzuras, we're not sure if they're blood, so you have to first examine them. But if you somehow know it's blood, then of course shira does not, according to the Rashba at least, does not really help you. Anyway, it's interesting, the Mechaber sometimes brings both opinions, and he does that Sivav as well. And I guess sometimes the second opinion is necessary if you have to be soymech on it, you have to be mitzarefet to some heter, a woman who may be becoming clean. Here you have, this is not necessarily blood, so I guess it's definitely helpful. Otherwise, why bring the two? Decide which one you hold. So obviously, usually we go by the first one, and that's what appears to be what the poskim are going by, the first opinion. All right, we'll stop here. Next week, Mitzvah Hashem, we'll start Siman Kuf Pei Tes, which is one of the most important Siman in Hilchas Niddah that deals with Veset Kavua and not Kavua, period, basically, the period of the woman in the calculation that needs to follow.